Hey listeners, last year was our 15th year of the best in food storytelling. As we head into 2025, we're kicking off a contest in collaboration with the podcast series Feast and Harmony and Sixth Man, where you have the opportunity to win a 4-night cruise for 2 on Chefs Making Waves, a food, wine, and spirits festival at sea. When you donate to HRN, you'll be entered for the chance to win a porthole cabin for 2 on Chefs Making Waves, sailing May 5th through 9th, 2025, from Miami to Cozumel, Mexico on Norwegian Gem. You'll also support another year of great food storytelling with a portion of your donation going toward disaster relief for the food and beverage communities within Western North Carolina and Southern California. This cruise is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for culinary adventurers, featuring top celebrity chefs including Jonathan Waxman, Antonio Lafaso, Robert Irvine, and many, many more. There's a myriad of experiences such as restaurant takeovers, live food and mixology demos, themed parties, and more. To enter your chance to win, please visit heritageradionetwork.org/cruise. Terms and conditions apply. You must be 21 or over to enter. That's heritageradionetwork.org/cruise. This episode is brought to you by Plugra European-style butter, crafted for those who demand precision and exceptional results in the kitchen. With 82% butter fat and a slow churn process, Plugra gives you flakier crusts, fluffier cakes, and rich, melt-in-your-mouth pastries. Because great baking starts with great butter. Unlike standard American butters, which have only 80% butter fat, Plugra ensures the ideal moisture and fat balance so your recipes turn out just right every time. That's why professional chefs trust Plugra and home bakers love it. Plugra's slow churn process creates a smooth, creamy butter that gives dough a soft, pliable texture, making rolling, folding, and laminating effortless. Whether you're perfecting a buttery pie crust or layering a delicate croissant, Plugra helps you bake with confidence. Experience the difference for yourself. Find Plugra in stores near you or visit plugra.com. That's Plugra.com.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Hey, welcome to Beer Sessions Radio on Heritage Radio Network. I'm Jimmy Carboni. I'm the host. It's our 16th year, and today is March 12th, 2025. We've covered a lot of different stories, not necessarily all about beer, some about ingredients, and the last year I've done a couple shows about corn. One was with Clay Risen and Mai's Nation and some of the Mexican corn whiskeys, and in the fall, we talked with Ellie Markowitz and Amy Halloran about recipes and some traditions of heritage corn in the Northeast. So there's a book out there, Masa, and I've wanted to talk to this gentleman for quite a while. So we're thrilled to welcome him here. Jorge, just give everyone an introduction, and tell them about your book and, who you are, because I think you're kind of a leader in the field of corn, heritage corn, Masa.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. My name is Jorge Gaviria. I'm the founder of Masienda. It started back in 2014 as really a purveyor of single origin Mexican ingredients with a real strong emphasis on heirloom corn, and kind of just built the business. It was really kind of like I would say a lifestyle business at the time. I just really wanted to have a relationship with restaurants without still working in restaurants. I was kind of getting burnt out, but wanted that kind of relationship with, creative relationship with chefs, and really kind of helped spark a movement in the U.S. to, I think, reconnect with a food that we really take for granted, which is masa, which is the building block of so many foods, obviously in the Mexican canon, but as well as other countries and cultures throughout Latin America. So really have had a long, really rewarding journey, kind of getting to this point. Now we have a sort of more evolved take on, Mexican food at the grocery store level. We still continue to offer our food service, restaurant support, and we also have a direct to consumer channel as well that we are able to provide kind of a range of kitchen tools, from like tortilla presses to molcajetes to our best-selling masa flour. So kind of cover a lot of ground, but we care a lot about Mexican food and a lot about masa.
No, it's exciting, and it's once you taste it, you can't go back. So masa, we're talking about things like tortillas, tamales, pozole. So if you're working in a restaurant, just tell us how you got started in this. What made
Yeah,
you? Were you cooking some of these ingredients already?
I had an entrepreneurial bug. I knew that I wanted to start my own business. I explored restaurants to see if that was something that I wanted to do directly. And I had an interest, but I think I realized that my skill set might be in sort of working with restaurants in some collaborative way. And I also just had like a really strong interest in developing products that spoke to kind of the way I grew up eating and kind of the cultural worlds that I inhabited growing up in Miami. I grew up eating a lot of Goya, and I just sort of thought, as I saw there was a revolution starting in consumer packaged goods, particularly like, at the grocery level. I was just seeing a lot of things evolve and change and adapt to, consumer wants and values, but I wasn't seeing that happen in the foods that I grew up eating. Like Goya just wasn't like really moving into organic and regenerative and like, some deeper cuts on beans and things like that. It was just sort of like a really strong brand, obviously, but I just wanted more as I started to get more curious about food and learn more about supply chains and, where our food comes from. So yeah, I think it just sort of all conspired to kind of hit at one moment. And I had this basic idea that I wanted to start a tortilleria. At the time, I was working at Blue Hill, Stone Barns, and also New York. And my thought was that we would start this, basically a tortilla bakery, like a lot like Tartine Bakery, and just kind of make this really beautiful temple to a really, really high quality tortilla. But it was hard to find a supply chain that I felt like would differentiate the brand and kind of the story from the beginning. Not to say, obviously, there's not corn in the US. There's a ton of corn. We produce more corn than anywhere else in the world by like a ton, many tons, millions of tons,
Many
to be
times.
exact. But I was just really interested in seeing kind of like, as I started to peel back the layers of the onion, realizing the origin story of corn is in Mexico. And I was really curious about native varieties, whether they still existed, what those supply chains looked like, who was growing them. And the more I started to research, the more I realized there was just an unbelievable opportunity to connect everything that I'd been learning on the regenerative agriculture side when I was at Blue Hill, to creating a fair market opportunity in Mexico for smallholder farmers, and then connecting that with chefs, who were part of this community that I really have always admired and respected, and just finding a place, just connecting the dots and connecting people to make a high integrity value chain come to life. So that's sort of how Masienda got started. We ended up scrapping the tortilleria very quickly because it just was very hard to do that while building a supply chain from scratch in very rural, remote parts of Mexico. And that was in 2014. And the business has evolved a lot since then.
So let's keep working our way backwards to forwards. So corn, where in Mexico is the birthplace of corn?
It is debated still, and I'm sure we'll still find archaeological deposits of things that dispute or throw into relief kind of new areas that we hadn't maybe considered before. But roughly, central southern Mexico, Oaxaca is believed to be a birthplace of corn, in one particular valley there. And there's archaeological evidence to support that, but it goes back thousands of years. We don't exactly know how it made the jump to become corn. Corn originates from teosinte, which is basically a weed. It's a plant, a grass, that grows still throughout Mexico, but that is the sort of genetic ancestor of corn. And no one really quite knows how it made that jump from being that grass to corn, and the miracle that it is, because it's just such a, I mean, it's yeah, it completely changed the course of an entire civilization. So there's a lot of curiosity around how that happened because it made such a huge impact and continues to make such a huge impact on how we consume, foods throughout the kind of the food chain.
It's very interesting. I know that from grain stories too about everything started as a grass, which means that whatever we call grains or carbs are actually plants. So it's
Yeah,
still all plant based.
it's like chocolate. Chocolate's a plant, which means it's a salad, right? It's like kind of the same logic.
Oh yeah. No, it's cool. I mean, when I think about corn, I mean, like one thing I like about in your book, Masa, you do have recipes for making things. And when I was a kid, one of my grandfathers was from the south of Italy, and a staple of our menu was really good polenta. And I don't know
Hmm.
where he got that cornmeal, but it wasn't cornmeal from a box.
Yeah.
And my first introduction to heritage corn in the States was maybe about 15 years ago. There was a grower and a miller in Finger Lakes, New York. They were called Cayuga Pure Organics. And they basically had a polenta that I used as grits for shrimp and grits, but that
Mm.
had the same quality and flavor that my grandfather's polenta used to have. So
Mm.
that's kind of like I've got a taste for that kind of corn. Um,
Yeah,
but
me
what, you know
too.
what's different about the Mexican corn because this nixtamalizing.
Yeah.
But just talk. It'd be fun to have you talk us through on the radio so that we can kind of be at the same point to talk
Yeah.
about other dishes.
Yeah. So, I mean, all corn in the world, even corn, ossofile in Italy and, just like any varietal, yellow number two in the US, Monsanto's many varietals, all of it is based on the genetics of Mexico. That is the birthplace. And there are 59, depending on who you ask and what like scholars you ask, but around 59 to 60 land race or sort of like pure expressions of different breeds of corn. And these are all in existence and grow sort of not naturally, but like in sort of what is an open air seed bank in Mexico and various regions throughout the country. And this is like the primordial soup that like then ended up, becoming uh, I don't know, shipped around the world. Whether that was through just like clear, colonization and just taking certain things and like the Italians did, Spanish did, and bringing it back to Europe. To the I should say the Spanish, which then ended up working its way down to Italy. But yeah, it's an amazing thing to think that everything is based on that. So there's great corn in Mexico for polenta. It's still there. Bolita is actually one of the varietals that we first started sourcing at Masienda, and it makes just an amazing. I actually ground it before I started learning how to nixtamalize into grits, and I just thought it was off the charts with flavor and had like all this natural oil that just like I barely had to add anything, any fat to it. It was just like
Yeah.
it sat really pretty on its own. So yeah, you can use all of this corn. All of the corn is sort of it's a wide range of starch properties and things like that. That phenotypic characteristics, organoleptic qualities that you want to kind of use for certain eating occasions, and they are still used for very specific purposes in Mexico. But yeah, I just wanted to start off by saying that all the corn in the world owes itself to Mexico. So thank you to Mexico for holding it down. And nixtamalization is interesting. So the corn without the process of nixtamalization, nixtamal is what the corn becomes after it goes through nixtamalization. It is the process of cooking and soaking corn, field corn in this case, which is a hard kind, not the sweet corn that grows, through the summer and you eat on the cob. Um, this is it basically goes through the sort of alchemy process, and unless it goes through that, it's sort of an empty calorie. It's a delicious calorie, but it's an empty calorie. When it goes through the process, it's sort of alchemized. It essentially gelatinizes the corn so that it becomes workable into a dough. It fortifies the corn with a bunch of nutrients. It activates the corn's naturally occurring nutrients that are otherwise not bioavailable to you when you eat it. So niacin being kind of the primary nutrient that's sort of unlocked in that process. And we know that it makes a big difference because when um, what's the word I'm looking for? The politically correct term. When the Spanish took this back to Europe, they took the ingredient, but they didn't take the process and the wisdom of the tradition with them, and the result was a higher per capita consumption of corn, but without nixtamalization, and there was a higher proportion of calories being dedicated to this staple without that nutrition, and pellagra took hold across kind of wherever the foodway, wherever the foodway found itself. So pellagra was it's basically a disease caused by niacin deficiency, and it was sort of like a curse in a way that just like shame on you, for taking this period and also not doing right by the process. So kind of an
When
interesting
did
repercussion.
nixtamalization? I mean, you don't really know when corn went from a grass to, the corn plant, but when do most people think that nixtamalization was created or discovered?
There's debate on that too, like anything else. I mean, there's been examples of, urns, not urns. It's not just like exclusively for ashes of dead people. I'm sorry, an urn. Is that
Urns and
technically
clay.
just that? But like, colanders and things like that that had alkaline residue on them that kind of can carbon date back to, several thousands of years ago. It's disputed but a long time, thousands of years basically. And it's a pretty amazing thing. No one knows how that happened either. I mean, the mystery is really amazing considering just like what had to happen for, like, not only did the miracle of corn have to happen, which corn is a man-made agricultural staple. I don't think most people know that. Like, in order for it to actually be viable, it has to be, planted by man, human intervention.
Oh, I didn't know that. So even
Yeah.
going back thousands of years, humans were planting the corn.
Yeah, they needed to. I mean, first, no one even knows how the jump happened, but the jump happens. Let's just say that that's just magic. And then, we had to figure out through trial and error that this isn't going to grow on its own. When you think about a corn cob, it's very, very tightly bound on the cob, and like the kernels are bound to the cob, and then it's wrapped in husks that are very tightly bound as well. If you ever try to remove corn husks, it's not the easiest thing to do. So if that falls on the ground, it's not going to just automatically plant itself. You have to really select the seeds that are obviously going to be more vigorous, plant those, and continue the process of selection. And hope for good weather and like good soil quality and all those things too. So that had to happen. And then there's a lot of speculation about how it must have occurred, but somebody probably had some leftover. So nixtamally means ashes. So that's part of the word comes from ashes, which is it's an alkaline substance that was used early on. It's believed in, nixtamalization. Maybe somebody had a fire, like a pot of ashes that were used to kind of, like keep a tidy fireplace, and like it got wet and didn't know it was in there, and like it rained and it collected some water and it was still in the bottom, and then they cooked it and like realized like this amazing thing happened where it transformed the corn. And it's not just like all the fortification and stuff, it also tastes really good. It's that when when corn is cooked in that alkaline water, it kind of takes on like a ramen like property. I mean, alkaline noodles, alkaline ramen, like it has this like amazing umami quality to it that's really delicious, and it's pretty addictive.
Whether it's ash or charcoal, my wife just got a natural, what's it called, dental floss
Yeah,
that it has something to do with charcoal as well, and
that
it's a
was also used. Yeah, yeah,
black string. So yeah,
yeah.
no, it's fascinating. It's something that's jumped out of your book using that. So how would you use ash? Let's say we've got this. We take the corn off the husk, and what will we do with the ash? Like, I mean, just to guide me through this rudimentary nixtamal process.
So ash, you can create lye from ash, and lye is highly alkaline. I think it's even more alkaline than calcium hydroxide, which is more commonly used today. And so, if you were to sort of boil some ash, and don't quote me on the proportions right now, I'm a little rusty on my ash work at home. But my wife, after like a couple times, she was just like, "Please don't do this anymore. It's really,
Don't bring it in the house.
yeah, it's really nice and smoky, but she doesn't like that smell." So, yeah, you basically boil some ash in water, let it kind of come down and settle, and then you'll get like this sort of like surface slick liquid that is that's essentially lye, and it's highly alkaline, and you can use that, separate the ash from the stuff, the liquid itself, and use that to then cook the corn, soak it in it, and yeah, you've got nixtamal as well.
And then how long do you cook it?
It depends on the kernel, and how hard it is, like what the moisture content is of it. Like beans, it's like hard to tell the exact hard and fast time. Um, Varietals, affect that, like moisture. But around an hour or so, depending on how hard it is, how tough it is. You want to soften it. You want to, if you're making masa, I mean, it depends on what the end use is too. If you're making masa from it, you want it to be sort of al dente. You want it to like have a little bit of chalkiness to it, like a little bite to it, but soft enough to kind of just be workable once it's sort of ground into a dough.
Wow. It's I, I'm going to go back to where you started, talking about the supermarket, getting
Yeah.
tortillas. Um, so growing up, what did you find in the supermarkets? Did you find did they have masa harina then? And you were talking about um, dry mosses that were popular in the 20th century.
Yeah. Maseca's been kind of the household name in the US for, 50 plus years. Yeah, it's been around for nearly, what, 75 years, maybe on the note, like right actually around, it's like 75 anniversary right now. It's crazy. But it took a while to adopt in Mexico. People just were really used to freshly nixtamalized corn and freshly milled corn. They actually thought that maseca tasted like sawdust. And there were conspiracy theories that there was sawdust in it, which is why it tasted so bad. So it was a really slow burn there, which you got to give them credit. They stuck with it and like figured out a way to kind of muscle it through the market. But they saw an opportunity with the diaspora moving increasingly north to the U.S. to basically make a convenient solution to have whatever masa-based product you wanted with just the addition of water. And it was a really revolutionary concept when you willing to make some sacrifices if you're far from home. And I don't know, it all just sort of worked over a lot, through a lot of persistence. So Maseca has been the household name of Masa for a long time. It's a proprietary eponym. So if you've like a band-aid is to bandage, as Sharpie is to marker, Maseca is to masa flour or masa harina. And yeah, most people are like, "Hey, we love your Masienda Maseca," and I'm like, "Those are two different brands." So let's kind of acknowledge that first. But yeah, as they grew bigger, they started to acquire tortilla companies. So Mission was acquired, I think, in like the 80s or something like that, and then Guerrero was acquired maybe in the 90s. And those sort of gave an opportunity for them to produce masa for those very large brands. And before you knew it, they were also taking over the traditional process of most tortillerias across the country. So instead of those, the OGs were still cooking corn, grinding it from scratch, all of that. They were like, why don't we just sell this to you? It's so much easier to use. They would bribe them, say like, why don't we'll give you $1,000 to fix the awning of your store. If you start buying product from us, we'll give you a full pallet for free. And they took a lot of market share very quickly that way. So even the local tortillerias that you think are kind of local in like the wholesome sort of way, and unique, are all using the same raw ingredient and actually like not that different from each other. So I found myself in Miami with there were local some it was not really a large Mexican population, and there weren't really a lot of tortillerias around, but I thought I was getting like the most unique brand,
Yeah.
like Bandera I can't even remember. It had like a Mexican flag on the front of it. It must have been like Ole Foods or something like that, which is made in Atlanta. But yeah, I thought I was getting like something different, quote unquote local, and it was just maseca, like so I was basically eating maseca my whole life, just like everybody else who grew up in like the millennial generation. And yeah, I mean, it was a large part of my childhood in terms of like daily staple. I'd come home, first thing I would do is just like cut some cheese, put it on top of a tortilla, add some hot sauce to it, put it in the toaster oven, and like make tostadas, cheese tostadas. So yeah, it was like I subsisted on it for a long time, and then it wasn't until fast forward many years later when I was like working in restaurants in New York, and I went to Mexico and started really tasting what a pure expression of nixtamal is, that I was like, oh, this is different. This is better. I like this. This is life changing.
Yeah, no, it's what you said. It's a whole food. You can eat almost that, whether it's tortilla, tamales, whatever, hominy. Sometimes you don't need that much. But
Yeah.
back to your journey, because I love these origin stories. So you were an entrepreneur. You were becoming aware of what you wanted. What were some of the first places you went, if assuming you went to Mexico, to kind of find your way? Were you going to distributors? Were you going to chefs? Were you going to, someone that could help you find farmers growing corn?
Yeah, I spent like 6 months researching. Once I was turned on to Mexico as being a potential supply chain solution for this tortilleria that never got started. I started basically just, I got curious about NAFTA and what trade looked like and what it would even be like to import the corn, and realized there was this whole history around basically the farming, like subsistence farming in Mexico, particularly at the corn level, was just really hurt during like with the passage of NAFTA, because the US was allowed to now commodity dump on Mexico and basically drive prices down. And they're sending a lot of corn to Mexico. Mexico's our largest customer of corn. The US is the largest customer of corn. And so yeah, it was just really detrimental to the preservation and like the longevity of this tradition. And I thought that was a problem that really was worth trying to solve for, with the additional benefit on the user end of like basically sourcing the highest quality corn in the world, like at the origin. So, I researched every article I could find, and like anybody who had an opinion about it, I found them online and just reached out to them. And I was like, hey, I'm trying to source heirloom corn for this, soon to open tortilleria in New York and Brooklyn. And I'm looking for heirloom corn. I saw that you like had a quote in the New York Times, do you know where I can meet these farmers that you say are going out of business and, like losing their family, livelihood? And they're like, oh, we just sort of like had a feeling that could happen, but we don't know anybody personally. So it was really hard to find and connect with farmers in the beginning. And I finally realized that there
What
was
do
a
they
lot
call
of
that?
like,
Writers, they call it kind of like a writer's, I don't know,
there's like a, yeah, it was funny. I was like, okay, everybody cares a lot about this, but like no one really is like doing anything about it. So I felt more energized by that, especially when some people were like, it's impossible. If you're trying to do that, it's just like, don't even do it. And so I ended up making progress through what is basically like the USDA equivalent in Mexico. And there's a lot of work, government. I mean, corn is not just a staple for sustenance. It's a spiritual connection to God. It's like it, the divine, and it's sacrosanct. And so there's a cultural, I wouldn't even say like appreciation. It's just like a cultural depth to it that is not what you find obviously in the US. And so there are efforts to preserve it. There have been efforts for decades to document these accessions or, different varietals that live in the wild, um, you know, form seed banks at a community level. And I started just connecting with a lot of these seed banks and trying to get tapped into these local, growing regions, and finally kind of just like had cobbled together a small group of farmers, like 12 farmers in a couple different regions that made sense, that were willing to sell us their surplus. It was really important that we weren't buying whatever they were going to use for household consumption or for their community. It was just like if they happened to have additional to spare, we would buy it basically, wholesale quantities at retail cost. And that was sort of how the structure was established in the first year in 2014. And then it just kind of compounded from there. We work now in a network of about 2,000 smallholder farmers. They're not necessarily the ones who are, it's not 2,000 necessarily every year that are selling to us, because not everybody has a surplus year every year. But the network has definitely grown as more people realize that it's a viable place to sell anything they have on hand that they don't want to chalk up to a loss.
Do you think that some of these farmers have tried to expand what they're growing, or it's more just natural about if they have a bumper crop or something?
It depends on the region, like farther south where there's less mechanization, and it's really, really manual, like Oaxaca, Chiapas. It is really just whatever is there. That, like, if it was a good year, it was better rainfall. All these farmers are rain fed. They don't have any irrigation, so it's just there's a lot of risk. And if it's a good year, like they want to just offload whatever they have that's in addition to their household and community use. As you get farther north, even like the state of Mexico, some folks have tractors. There's sort of a blend between subsistence and commercial, but like nothing like commercial the way you see it in the US. It's still very, 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 very small production. So, and they have tried to, increase, but it's tough. It's like it's an expensive thing to do. So we really don't put the pressure on there. We've done some microfinancing, but it's hard to obviously carry the load of that larger network. So we really just try to kind of slip in and establish a presence and just offer consistency in offtake for them, rather than kind of dictate what needs to be grown or, when or how much.
Yeah, so you must have a very interesting network in place from the farmers to what are the points along the line? So the farmers, are they coming to a hub? Are they how do they first get their product from the farm?
So every year, it's pretty amazing. I studied communication, like media culture and communication, and this idea of like alternative communication is really fascinating to me. It's one of the things I was so enamored with when I started, which was that we started working with folks on the ground who, these like preservation groups or agronomist groups that were trying to help preserve by creating markets, like everything from community meetings like in the like very very town like very small town kind of like open it like soccer fields outside of the school where we would just kind of organize roundtables with the community to delivery cars with loudspeakers on them and communicating in the indigenous language that we're picking like we're providing this service in however long, and find us there, to broadcasting on local radio stations to get the word out again in like local indigenous languages. So it's just like it was just such an amazing thing to see how the message got out there. But it was just a lot of hands, a lot of effort, and it is every year to kind of just get the word out because so there's no one single place that people are grabbing, like Facebook. It's just like it's a little different down there. So it depends on the medium, and the medium is dependent on the region, and so we kind of there are a number of ways we get in front of people to get the word out.
Yeah, and when we gather these corns, I mean, do you go through and catalog it as like, I know there's certain ways some corn from Mexico's let's say catalog. I've seen land race, there's elevation, there's color, and there's region. That's what some people do. Or do you have a
We
system?
started that. Yeah, no, we kind of pioneered that like classification with regards to kind of the market, connection. That's scientifically what had been done by agronomists for a long time, and in the very beginning, we started to kind of classify that as well. I mean, the truth is that you have there are populations of varietals that exist in certain regions and clusters that you can find. So if you can localize that cluster, you can kind of count on the fact that what's being grown there is like phenotypically of that varietal. It's impossible to have like a pure bred because of open pollination. That's where hybrids come into place, and we don't work in that field. But yeah, we just tried to kind of open up to as much diversity we could support, and that ran the gamut from color to elevation to region, and varietal.
And then, so on this end, on whether you're selling to chefs or consumers, why don't you break down what you're selling now? How you represent it. The origins of the corn, or the colors, or landrace, and some of the new products that you're launching as well. To get
Yeah.
this into people's hands.
So since day one, we've always sold heirloom corn in its raw form, like kernel form, off the cob, like in a bag, 55-pound bag. That's sort of always been what we've done since the very beginning. But obviously, there are only so many people, even chefs, who are willing or able to nixtamalize corn every day for service, grind it. Mills are not cheap. They're highly labor intensive. You have to cut the stones, regularly. You have to have someone who knows how to cut the stones. They have to be consistent. So, it's no small wonder why Masa flour, like Masa harina, got started, because just not everybody can do that, with increasingly busy schedules, lives, etc. So we launched Masa flour back in 2020, which also happened to coincide with our with the pandemic, and all of our restaurant partners closed down during that time. And we had these like 2.2-pound bags online that were really just for chefs, and samples to buy whenever they wanted to taste it, as well as corn and, just kind of like the raw staple ingredients. And then like people were just at home cooking, and, couldn't go to the supermarket, couldn't really figure out um, how to make a really proper taco, for themselves if they tried. And so they started to get curious. And, we call these folks, like, there's a sort of a mix between project cooks and roots cooks, and some overlap in between. A lot of people, I would put myself in this camp too, of both actually, who grew up eating, masa on a daily basis, but had never tried to make it from scratch. Not just like using masa flour, but like literally cooking it, nixtamalizing it, milling it. And, a lot of people had a lot of extra time and disposable income on their hands during the pandemic. And so, we were not an exception to that. People were shopping online, and people happened to shop for, our products, which, as that started to kind of take hold, we were like, okay, well, why don't we start to add some tools to this so it's easier for everybody, not just chefs, to do this at home. So we launched a tabletop mill, called Molinito, that, was really for small businesses, cottage, kind of like, cottage businesses, to like really give this a shot, and see if this is something they wanted to do in their own local community. Kind of just democratizing the access to it, so it wasn't so expensive or, relegated to like fine dining, which is sort of how we started. It's like an expensive thing to start, a business, and the people who could support that were folks who had really high check averages. So
Yeah.
yeah, we kind of just went little by little, adding products and tools that kind of completed what we felt like was the kind of an authentic approach to Mexican cuisine around masa. And then, in 2023, after almost 9 years of being in business and focused really on food service, we started to become a nationally distributed retail brand. So our masa flour that had kind of been, percolating online for a while and making a name for itself, we were able to get into Whole Foods, and some natural retailers with that. That quickly became like the top selling masa in kind of the natural food space, which was really exciting. We got a look at the tortilla category, which, with Whole Foods as well, they were really excited to bring that on board, just a 2-ingredient tortilla, which had not been done before. And then, from there, we're launching into an entirely new category that I think now just kind of completes the picture of how we think about ourselves and what we want to do, which is really, elevate the Mexican kitchen for everybody. Obviously, from professional chefs, which is how we started, but especially now to home cooks, and offer prepared foods at home, that they can just put in the microwave and, experience basically restaurant quality at home.
That's a big jump. I see that you have frozen quesadillas at Whole
Yeah.
Foods now.
Yeah, they're launching in May, and it's really funny. Like it's not lost on us that for a company that would teach you how to literally, that wrote the book on how to cook corn, and millet in 24 hours, a 24-hour process to just get the raw ingredient of masa, is now selling, high quality 2-minute convenience meals at home, but they're really freaking good. Like we wouldn't do it if we didn't really believe in them. So we're excited to kind of have that range of accessibility.
Yeah. And what about I know there's a chef grade masa.
Yeah, so we started out with our heirloom masa line, and first it was called Chef Grade, and then we had more SKUs and started to just kind of because home cooks were interested in it, we dropped the chef, and it's just heirloom masa flour. But we're launching a masa taquera, so like a masa that is specifically made for bulletproof tortillas. So it's we're working with a larger production facility, which allows us to run larger batch sizes, which allows us to be a lot more consistent and precise with just how we dial in the cook. And basically, the formula, we're not washing any of the skins off of the corn, which is what a lot of um, tortilleros or tortillerías will do before they mill the corn, is they'll just wash the skin off, just because there's a lot of that kind of calcium hydroxide flavor, that alkaline flavor in it. And the skins are kind of where all the natural gums and elasticity are. So some people just prefer not to have that in there. But, for food service, an increasingly kind of delivery focused segment, we wanted to have something that could really hold up, to pre-cooking, storing throughout service, and not breaking on you or the customer. And so that is, we're really excited to launch that in a couple weeks. Masa taquera, it literally is like taking a bite out of like a Mexico City tortilla. It's amazing.
Oh, that's great. Who are some of the chefs that you work with? Um, and I know you started as a chef, so
Yeah, I'm humbly a cook, but yeah, our first customer was Enrique Olvera, who started, obviously Pujol in Mexico City, but opened up Cosme in New York City. That was our first customer. Technically, our first customer was, believe it or not, Peekskill Brewery, who made a beer for Roberta's. It was we were like, oh, we tried to sell Roberta's on it, and or I can't remember how it originated. I think Roberta's reached out to us and was like, we'd really like to do this beer together. Can you sell us blue corn that we make with Peekskill Brewery? So like our first PO, actually, our first invoice was on July 12th, and it was Peekskill Brewery technically. And we learned really quickly that most brewers use pre-gelatinized corn, which our corn was not, and it totally scorched the bottom of the kettle. So there was like this quote unquote carbonized flavor to it, which is how they were like, it's nice and smoky and carbonized. It was just like totally hammered in the kettle. So euphemistically speaking, it was just smoky. But yeah, it was called soft pour corn, which is very Roberta's.
oh yeah.
And
I never
and
tried
yeah,
that. We used to record there every week, and I must have missed it.
yeah, it was a fun time. It was 2014. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, since then, Jose Andres, Rick Bayless. I mean, we work with thousands of chefs, so like in every region across the country. And for a long time, we were doing a lot of international work too. So it just the network is, it's large.
Yeah. Well, we recently did a small tamales party in New York with a couple of Mexican chefs. One of my friends, Fernando, started out and has his own tamales. Basically, it's a tamale takeout shop. He does a lot of catering.
Hmm.
It's called Factory Tamal, and another guy in the Hudson Valley, another Fernando of downstate Newburgh, and
Mm.
it was
Oh
pretty
man, I
neat.
love
And
Newberg.
we got we had some of your Masienda products, and I didn't handle it, so I'm not even sure how it came. But each chef.
Hmm.
So Fernando from Factory Tamal, he's got a really robust. It's two little shops in the Lower East Side, and he's only been open maybe 7 or 8 years, and it's
Hmm.
just tamales. And he served one with some peppers, or just a vegetable tamal. He made and
Hmm.
the other one had like it was like, I think it was chicken, with mole. But downstate Newburgh made a dessert style where it was chocolate and the masa,
Cool.
and he finished it. But it was neat because I hadn't really been part of creating, you know, that type of event, that type of product before, and
Hmm.
it kind of made me think more about what you guys are doing, and how different your product is. I'm also part of the Bowl Azul festivals, and that's probably how I know what pozole is, or hominy. And
Yeah.
in your book, Masa says a little bit about it, but it's still, that's the mystery to me. Is I get bags of corn that's these giant pieces of dried corn, and I've seen
Hmm.
chefs do all kinds of things with it. But
Hmm.
back to the nixtamalization process. In the nixtamalization process, are the large hominy, the large pozole dried corn, is that just what happens from the nixtamalization, or does someone have to go and dry it?
Um, Hominy starts out as dried corn. In Mexico, there are two specific types of like land races or varietals of corn that are best or are favored for pozole because they're larger kernels. One is like really large, almost like the size of a quarter, but like thin, and another one's like sort of juicy and like kind of bulbous. And You find those regionally throughout, but it is essentially masa in development. It's dry
So
raw
that actually,
corn.
that dried corn that comes in a bag, if someone's getting regular, pozole hominy, that's just one kernel that's been
Well,
nixtamalized.
it depends. I mean, like
Yeah,
if you have pre-cooked hominy, that like from a can, that's like ready to go. It's been
yeah,
nixtamalized ostensibly, at least if to be called hominy, like it should be, but there's no rules around what people call things, so there's like food fraud all over. But ostensibly, if it's being sold as hominy or pozole, it's already gone through nixtamalization, and it's not milled to make masa. So it's basically another word for it would be nixtamal. It's just nixtamal that's in a can or nixtamal that's in a bag. Sometimes it's dried after it's cooked, and so that's where you kind of get like that dehydrated hominy.
yeah.
To be hominy, technically, it has to have gone through that nixtamalization process.
So if you got a bag of just a general hominy, nixtamal, it's dried. That you could mill that. You could start. You can do more than just stew it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you would need to like rehydrate it for sure so
Yeah,
that it's workable. But yeah, it won't probably work as well as fresh if you were to make it into masa. But that's basically what masa flour is. It's just like dehydrated ground hominy, dehydrated ground nixtamal.
yeah. So is it, and for you guys, I want to know about what your hominy is, because we did an event in Denver, and one of the chefs there, El Diablo, um,
Hmm.
who's really noted as a pozole chef, he used your I'm not sure what it is, nixtamal, and it was a
Hmm.
beautiful little smaller. Uh, I didn't know any of the language. To me, it was a smaller
No,
corn,
it's a, yeah.
and
I
it
mean,
was
he
earthy.
probably was just
It had
using.
some earthy, and it had a little bit of color, and it was one of the most beautiful pozzoles I've ever had in my life.
Oh, I'd love to hear that. Thank you to Diablo. Shout out to them. The varietal, I don't know what varietal they used. I mean, the truth is like any raw corn, any corn can be used for making hominy. There's just two varietals in particular that have been popularized for it because they're softer starches, they're very floury. One is called cacahuacintle, and the other one is called maíz ancho. And cacahuacintle is the most common one. That's like the kind of bulbous one I was talking about. It's like kind of a large bead. Um, but other varieties can be used too. So in its raw state, it's like kind of you're starting with the same concept, and you're just cooking it in this alkaline water. You're soaking it, and what you have at the other side is nixtamal or hominy. What you do with it, whether you just like throw it into a soup and call it pozole, or run it through the grinder, the mill, and call it masa, is totally up to you.
Wow. And what about some of the other recipes from your book? I also know you have a new book coming out too.
Yeah.
Um, tabletop tortilla is one of them. just talk our listeners through. If I'm going to order from Masienda, something from
Yes.
my home or my kitchen. Um, Even I don't know anything about it. I'm on the consumer end. I eat
Yeah.
it. I've never made it. I've had masa, wet masa, and I've seen people make tortillas and things, but I still don't really quite understand, this whole that whole part of the industry. So maybe talk me
Yeah.
through like your tabletop tortilla recipe, just because it seems so basic, but I know that it's only basic because of your product.
Yeah. So the Masa book, which came out on it's been like 3 or 4 years now, was kind of the culmination of everything I had learned over 10 years at Masienda, and just realized that it's such an oral tradition. There really had never been anything written down to like just kind of connect all these dots that you see across Mexico and just the entire foodway of masa. And I just felt like, kind of owed it to the tradition and the history to just document this and make sure there was a living, breathing artifact that kind of gave anybody who wanted to jump into it, whether they were from the culture, a masa faring culture or not, the ability to learn it. And so the book is kind of a reference book because it's like it was the first single subject book that ever existed on masa. It did really well. It's got gorgeous photography, and the Great and Harriet team did an amazing job there. So it's kind of like it's a reference book and cookbook costume. There's essentially 50 recipes in there, largely like foundational recipes of how to make masa from scratch, using the nixtamal process, how to make pozole. It's more of a guidance to like how to build the foundation than anything. Masa shapes, there's like, that's what I call them in the book. There's like 30 masa shapes, that are kind of, pasta has many different little shapes that you find throughout Italy. Masa is similar, and just sort of some of these like recipe applications and the formats that they can come in, from tortillas and tostadas to tamales to tlacoyos, huaraches, like, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to kind of create like a guidance on how to make those, and then really just like create some suggestions about like what to put in them or on them. But it's pretty kind of like foundational, with a couple of new age recipes from some kind of modern takes on classics, from some chefs that we've worked with over the years. But yeah, the new cookbook is very different. It's a more conventional, traditional cookbook with real recipes, like start to finish, that you can jump into. There's really no history. I mean, it's fun. There's like a playful history of infused and everything in the head notes, but I've teamed up with Fermin Nunez, who's the chef at Suerte in Austin, as well as Este, and Bartotti. He's an amazing chef who we've had the pleasure of working with over the years, and just like really fun to collaborate with. I did not have an interest in writing recipes, candidly. It's part of the reason why I didn't keep working as a chef. I just like, this is not my favorite part. I love writing about it. I just didn't want to, be on the hook for creating recipes on a daily basis. So, yeah, we just really kind of had complementary skill sets and wanted to both put a book out there. And it's basically a testament, an homage to street food. It's called Vitamina T, vitamin T. So if you've ever been to Mexico, it's kind of like a very 90s term for, the canon of food that starts with the letter T, like tacos, tamales, tostadas, tortas, tacoyos, like all these great foodstuffs, that you find on the street that all start with T. It's like, I need my daily dose of vitamin T. It means like you need a hit of the good stuff.
Wow. So let's say we're going to do a party with you, and
Yeah.
you're going to have one of your favorite chefs or an up and coming chef, which is probably more likely. Well, talk us through it. A vitamin T, maybe five dishes that we'd have
Oh,
at the
five
party.
dishes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we break it up in chapters. I think it's like, basically, I'd have a really great taco, something that's just, it's fun for people to assemble on their own. So whether that's just like a guisado, like a stewed kind of meat or something like that we've got, or it's like a large, full fish, that's been butterflied, and you can kind of make your own tacos that way, like a pescado a la talla. Um, do something like that as a fun centerpiece. Some past hors d'oeuvres, of tlacoyos, which is like probably one of my favorite masa shapes and formats. It's basically just like a little masa pancake that's filled with beans or some kind of like legume, and topped with whatever you want. Like usually just salsa and cheese is great. Some sopes in there too. Like little masa pancakes that are just like have like a little ridge around the edge. You Again, just salsa and cheese is like fine for me, but you can put other stuff on there too, any proteins. Um, you know, if it's lunchtime, maybe some tortas, like a milanesa, little bites, like little milanesa sliders, torta sliders. And for dessert, like a chocolate tamal. Sounds great. I like dessert tamales a lot,
Yeah,
more than the
I would
savory
say
kind.
that at the event we did with Downstate Newburgh, his chocolate tamales really stood out just as something
Yeah.
refreshing. But it was still masa, it was
Yeah,
corn.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and he just put a little something crumbly and crispy on it, and a little whipped cream. Friend of
Okay.
mine, David Navarro, he's from Mexico City, and he cooks with us a lot. He's a moonlighting chef. He traveled the whole world cooking, but he doesn't work in the field. And we were just talking about doing something with your masa at some of our New York City events, like some barbecue events. And he says, I want to make sopes. And he's made them
Can't go
before. We've
wrong.
done some pretty, but for me, they're small. They're a little thicker than a tortilla. But what's different about a sopes than a tortilla? Is it a different recipe?
Basically, just yeah, a little thicker with a ridge around the edge that is meant to retain toppings. So sort of just like it's a little
Yeah, but
contained
is it
bite.
pretty much the same
Same
dough as
masa.
is the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
masa?
same masa. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, totally.
yeah. No, that I'm glad you mentioned that because that's really fun for like a tasting event, um,
Yeah,
cocktail party. Um,
super fun.
yeah, and and for street food, in New York, you see tortas a lot, and I don't think I ever thought about tortas as a Mexican food, till I
Hmm.
realized that's what a lot of people have every day.
Yeah, totally.
Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
where does the masa fit into the tortas? Is it in the
Honestly,
bread?
no. I probably You could make an argument. You could make a little breading, for the milanesa, but it's that one's a little bit more uh, masa. What's the word? It eschews masa.
Yeah.
Technically speaking.
And then making tortillas. During the pandemic, some of my friends in the Northeast who have their own mills for flour. There were like Maine grains up in Maine. There was a few tortilla recipes going around, and I did make some. I made some
Mhm.
flour, fresh local flour, whole grain flour tortillas, and they're really like a different animal. I mean, it was like just some kind of flat thing that has a lot of flavor that I kind of gave up on after after
Yeah,
one or two times. Um,
yeah, I get it. I get it.
so I should
Keep
probably
at it.
try my hand at. So if I'm going to start from scratch with you guys, should I just tell me where I should go? I'll go to talk me through the website.
You can go to our site for the kind of the basics, the non-perishable basics, from corn to cal to masa flour. Um, we do sell our masa flour on Amazon if you were trying to just kind of make it a quick prime delivery to your doorstep. And then everything else is in grocery stores. So we, like I said, we're launching our line of frozen entrees like our quesadillas in May, and really excited about that. So if you want to just kind of trust us that we did the right job on the tortilla, and the cheese is amazing. The cheese is we're sourcing from a creamery, a third generation Mexican creamery in Colorado. That's just I worked at Murray's in New York, and I remember we
Yeah,
carried their cheese, and I never seen anything on this level, like artisanal cheese made in the U.S. that gets anything close to what you can have in Mexico. And this knocked my socks off. It's so good, so good.
and then I think of some people I know who are making tortillas. Well, I know Sobra Masa in New York.
Hmm.
Zach, I don't know if you sell to him, but
Yeah, yeah, we do.
yeah, and I don't know if he sells tortillas, but he's making masa, and
Yeah, he
You
makes
know what
masa and
else he
great
sells? 'Cause
tortillas.
I mostly know him as a restaurant owner.
Hmm. Yeah, no, they're great. And there's so many community establishments that have opened up over the years that offer really high quality tortillas, and we're happy to be a part of that movement. So, um, yeah, thanks to everybody who's make that possible.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting. I mean, just on that level, and in Boston too, there's El Barrio Tortilleria and Salsa.
Tortilleria, yeah.
I don't know if you know them, Alex Sands and Servio. I think they also started making their tortillas and salsa in the pandemic.
Oh,
Not sure.
cool. Yeah, it's so many popped up. Was really a silver lining of the pandemic. Just
Yeah, and then just when you're on that level, it's the kind of thing we seek out, and at home, my jump is having tortillas from someone like that in
yeah,
my home, and making that part of our regular food. Um,
yeah.
but I got to make it. I got to get your your masa flour or something, and you got
No pressure. You can get tortillas. We make tortillas with one of the oldest, best tortillerias in the country, El Popo, that is based out of Chicago. So, we do the hard work for you if you want
that's
to
what I'll
just,
do. Because
yeah.
my
And
flour
I don't blame
tortillas
you. I do the same thing now too that I have kids.
my flour tortillas didn't come out so great. I think I
Yeah.
froze them just to see if that one day I'd want to try them again, but they didn't.
I'm
So,
sorry.
and then last thing you said you talk. I know you made some corn beer with Peekskill Brewing, but do you know of like a traditional, fermented drink with corn that maybe homebrewers could try to make?
Tehuino. So tehuino is a beverage consumed typically in the hotter months in Jalisco, and in the state of Jalisco, and it is basically fermented. It's fermented corn. Like the process is basically using the native yeast on the corn. Um, you boil. It's like kind of like I've seen a couple different ways it's made. It's like can be made into like a slurry and then it's like strained. But basically it's like derived from it's almost like tastes like vinegary, obviously from the fermentation, but it's almost like a drinking corn vinegar that they then cut with like lime juice and salt. It's delicious. Very, very refreshing.
Yeah.
I'm sure like some slight alcohol content, but I don't know exactly how much.
Yeah, no, that's to me that's all food. Everything seems to go back to traditional fermentation. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
got some friends that they're doing a Korean inspired little bistro, and for them it's all banchan, but it's either it's kimchi, pickling. Um, yeah, it's exciting to get your hands into home fermenting and see what you can do with it. So,
yeah.
listen, great talking to you, man. Uh,
You too.
I
Thanks for having me.
everything you said is new to me, and I am reading your book. It's one I have it on Kindle, and it's kind of a few pages at a time kind of book, which
Yeah,
is well, that's how I am with
it's
all
good.
nonfiction. I've got your book now
Yeah,
for a year, and I'll refer to it. And I was looking at it while we talked.
I
Um,
appreciate that.
the evolution of Masa Harina, that's pretty interesting, but it's really a great book, and it wouldn't have thought that you'd be the first person to really write a modern book about
Definitely,
Masa.
definitely, I didn't either, but it had to
Yeah.
happen. So happy it did.
Well, anything else you want to say on the way out? So one of your favorite things, or you mentioned we could order tortillas from your
I'm gonna go eat.
house.
I
You
didn't
got
have lunch.
questions?
It's 3:05 here, and I haven't eaten yet. So I'm gonna go make some tostadas real quick.
That sounds great. All right. Thanks so much, Jorge. Thanks for joining me
Thank
on
you.
Heritage Radio Network. Thanks to George, our engineer, and we'll catch you next time on Beer Sessions Radio. The show will be out in a couple weeks, so thanks so much.
Looking forward to it.
You
Thanks,
too,
Jimmy.
man.
Take care.